I'm getting 100 comments asking me about playoff expansion again over the last couple of days. I guess because they announced the dates the games are going to be played. But again, for the 25th time or how many times I've made this video, this is not breaking news. This playoff expansion was announced months ago, almost a year ago. This was approved. We have known this was coming in the 2024 season. We have known that the 2023 season is the last year of a 14 playoff. We've known all that. My thoughts haven't changed at all. I don't have any thoughts on the dates that the games are being played. So I guess I'll just reiterate for the 30th time what I think about playoff expansion going from 4 teams to 12 teams and everything involved in that. I've got no problems or issues with it at all. It doesn't bother me in the least. The 4-team playoff also didn't bother me. I wasn't leading the charge for playoff expansion, but I also don't think that the 4-team playoff is some sort of sacred cow that we can never change, touch, or alter. When you look at the way this is going to play out, to me, the positives far outweigh the negatives. And yes, there are some negatives, and I'll get those out of the way. There will be certain regular season games in college football now that don't mean quite as much. That is true. There's just no way around that. That's true in any sport. The more teams you allow into a postseason, the less relevant overall a season is going to become. There's just no way really around that. It doesn't mean that the college football season is going to become totally irrelevant. College football regular season is not going to become college basketball regular season or Major League Baseball regular season. The two most irrelevant regular seasons in all of sports, and maybe you can throw the NBA in there too. That's not the case. Take Michigan, Ohio State, for example. In a lot of years, now not this past year, but in a lot of years, that's basically a playoff game. Michigan versus Ohio State. It takes place on the last weekend of the regular season. More times than not, the winner of that game ends up winning the division and the conference and then going on to make the playoffs. For a while, it was Ohio State. Now it's been Michigan. Now, of course, last year, as it turns out, that game, quote unquote, didn't matter at all, right? So fast forward to a 12-team playoff. A game like Michigan and Ohio State played on week 12 is going to have a little bit less significance than it does in a lot of other years, at least in terms of playoffs. Now, for bragging rights, for Michigan fans, for Ohio State fans, I don't think it takes away from that game at all. You still get bragging rights for a year if you win that game, right? It's still the biggest game of the regular season to you as a Michigan and Ohio State fan. I don't think expanding the playoffs takes away from that game for Michigan and Ohio State fans. Maybe it takes away from that game a little bit from the rest of the college football viewing public, right? Because not as much typically will be riding on that game as in years past. But again, we have a 14 playoff last season, and technically that game meant nothing to the people that like to say that. Now, I don't think any college football games mean nothing, but that's the talking point, right? We have a 14 playoff. Michigan and Ohio State played. Michigan won the Big Ten. Ohio State lost, didn't win the Big Ten. They still both made the playoffs. So, to me, that's a negative that's not that big of a deal. What about the fact that there are going to be a lot more games in the month of November that now do have a ton of meaning, that in years past, according to the people in my comment section, had no meaning? First of all, this idea that unless there's a playoff berth on the line, the game has no meaning, I don't buy that to start with. I think that argument is false on its face, but that's the argument people make. Oh, well, these games aren't going to matter now because both teams make playoffs anyway. Okay, let's go with that. What about all the games played in November now that are going to have playoff implications that up until this point didn't? Take teams that are ranked anywhere from basically 8, 9, 10, all the way down to 20. There's potential for all of those teams to make a 12-team playoff. Look at all the games that are played in November between a 12th ranked team and a 15th ranked team. In a 14 playoff, those teams aren't getting in regardless, right? Well, now in a 12-team playoff, all of those games played in November involving basically any team in the top 20 becomes a huge game. A huge game. You also have playoff seeding. So back to the Michigan-Ohio State example. And there are a lot of examples I could use. I'm using Michigan and Ohio State because it's an easy example to use because typically both of those teams are ranked inside the top 10 at the end of the year. They play the last week of the regular season. They're in the same division, same conference. So in a lot of years, that's a huge game there at the end of the year. But you can use any game. Let's say Ohio State and Michigan are both undefeated, 11-0 heading into that game, right? Well, we know they're both getting into a 12-team playoff regardless of who wins that game and who goes on to win the Big Ten title. We know both those teams are getting into the playoff. So to the people that say, well, now that game don't mean nothing, woo, because we know they're both getting in. Well, this is where playoff seeding comes in, right? Do you want a bye week? Do you want a bye week? Because if you win that game and go on to win the Big Ten, you're going to get a bye in the first round of the playoffs. If you lose that Michigan-Ohio State game and you're sitting there at 11-1, guess what? You're playing in the first round of the playoffs. So would you rather have to win 4 playoff games to win a national title, or would you rather have to win 3? So the game is still going to have a ton of meaning. A ton of meaning. So no, I don't mind the playoff expansion. I've been sitting around here on YouTube reading comments and listening to people cry year after year after year, all during the month of December, about all these terrible, meaningless bowl games that are shown on TV. First of all, you don't have to watch those meaningless bowl games, so I don't know why you complain or cry about them. If you want college football, it's college football available for you to watch. Maybe it's 2 bad teams, maybe you got a bunch of opt-outs, whatever. But if you want to watch college football, it's available to you to watch. You don't have to watch the quote-unquote terrible bowl games. But to those people, let me ask you this. The week before Christmas, would you rather watch Clemson versus Oklahoma State in the Cheez-It Bowl? Or would you rather watch not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 college football playoff games played on college campuses at the higher ranked team stadium? Because that's what you're getting. Starting in 2024, on December 20th, we are going to have, that weekend, we're going to have 4 playoff games. It's going to be the playoff teams seeded 5 through 12. Seeds 1 through 4 will get a bye. They won't have to play that first round playoff game. Seeds 5 through 12 will have to play a first round playoff game. Seeds 5, 6, 7, and 8 will get a home playoff game versus teams 9 through 12. So 5 will play 12, 6 will play 11. You know how this stuff works. So, you sit around and cry a week before Christmas about the meaningless bowl games? Okay, now you get to watch, just make up some hypotheticals here based off sort of some teams that missed out on the playoffs last year, but not by much, right? So December 20th, you get to see Southern Cal host Penn State. Or maybe you get to see Tennessee host Penn State. Or maybe you get to see a Kansas State host an Oregon, whatever, on down the list 5 through 12. I've got no issue with the college football playoff expansion. And if there's anybody who would have a legitimate gripe against it, here's who should want to hang on to the 4-team playoff. Alabama fans, Georgia fans, Ohio State fans, Clemson fans, Southern Cal fans, Michigan fans. Pretty much any dominant program that recruits in the top 10 every single year. So I fall into that category as a Georgia fan. It benefits Georgia to have a 4-team playoff, not a 12. Who does it benefit to have a 12-team playoff? Second-tier teams. Tennessee, Washington, Oregon, teams like Oklahoma State in certain years, right? Teams like, hell, even look at teams like Minnesota, Northwestern, Iowa. Every 3 or 4 years, these teams have a 10-11 win season, right? They're never quite good enough to get into the top 4 or 5 and make the 4-team playoff, but these teams are now going to get an opportunity every once in a while in a 12-team playoff. So in addition to your blue blood, quote, traditional powers, whatever, dominant programs getting into the playoffs, your Georgias, your Bamas, your Ohio States, your Michigans, your Clemsons, your Oklahomas, your Southern Cals, your Texas, whatever. In addition to all that, in any given year, you're going to have 4 or 5, quote-unquote, Cinderella-type teams that get in. Now, I could do a whole separate video on this, but this is something that always confuses me. People sit around and they claim to love a Cinderella story. Oh, I'm so tired of the same teams being in the playoffs. I can't stand it. I wish some new, different teams would get in. And then as soon as that happens, those same people do what? Complain about the teams that got in. You all know people like this. I'm tired of this team being in. I'm tired of that team being in. I wish a different team could get in. Then Cincinnati gets in. Those same people. Can't believe they put Cincinnati in. Don't nobody want to watch Cincinnati. This is going to be boring. Cincinnati don't even deserve to be there. Same people. Last year, TCU. Same people. Can't believe they put TCU in there. Never mind the fact they sit around year after year complaining about the same teams being in there. They want different teams. Most of the people who are complaining about college football playoff expansion are people who just complain about everything, period. End of story. Doesn't matter. Something changes, they complain about it. Again, I wasn't dying to see college football go from 4 teams to 12. I've been happy with what I've seen for the most part year in and year out with a 4-team playoff. But once it became clear that that's the direction we were headed, a 12-team playoff, and I looked at how it was going to be done. First of all, if you've been watching this channel, you know how I feel about college football games and where they're played. I think college football games should be played on college campuses. If you think I'm not excited for that first weekend of home playoff games, I don't care who's involved. You can't tell me you're not going to get excited to watch Ohio State play a home playoff game, or Alabama, or Georgia, or Tennessee, or Southern Cal, or Texas, or Oklahoma, or Michigan, or whatever fill in the blank team. A home playoff game a week, but there's something we have never seen in college football. Never. No home bowl games ever. No home BCS title games ever. No home playoff games ever. No national championship home games ever. You can't tell me you're not excited to see first round playoff football played in college state football stadiums. Sign me up for that. I don't care what team is in and who they play. Home college football home playoff games are going to be the craziest football environment we have ever witnessed. Period. The Michigan Ohio State game, crazy every year. Tennessee Alabama game last year, one of the wildest environments I've seen in a long, long time. Big neutral site games like Texas Oklahoma or Georgia Florida that are played every year. Notre Dame Southern Cal, the Iron Bowl. These huge college football games that we see every year where the fans go absolutely nuts. It is all going to pale in comparison to what we see in the first round of the playoffs in college football when they're played on campus stadiums. I'm excited about the college football playoff expansion. Is it going to be perfect? No, nothing is perfect. And there's 133 teams in college football. It's never going to be quote unquote fair or even or whatever people like to say. Okay? They're splitting the difference here. You got some people some fans, some of the college football public that is sick of the idea of a playoff committee, people picking things, this person's biased, that channel's biased, this, blah, 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 blah. They won't shut up about it. ESPN's biased. The only reason SEC does this or that is because of ESPN. Then you hear another group of people. Oh, I can't stand watching Ohio State on TV because they're always on ABC and Kirk Herbstreit's the biggest Ohio State homer. Just complain about how much influence people have over college football, where they're ranked and where they're placed in bowl season and the playoffs. Well, to shut those people up, they gave us automatic bids. So, yes, if you win your conference, there's a good chance you're making the playoffs regardless of what your record is. The highest ranked, the 6, let me make sure I get this right because some people are getting confused on this. The 6 highest ranked conference champions, regardless of which conference they come from, whether it's the quote unquote Power 5 or Group of 5, the 6 highest ranked conference champions are guaranteed a spot in the 12-team playoff. The 4 highest ranked conference champions are guaranteed a bye in the first week of the playoffs. These home games that we were just talking about, they're going to be played on or around December 20th of every year, about a week before Christmas. So if you win your conference and you're one of the highest 4 ranked conference champions, you get a bye week. If you're the 5th or the 6th highest ranked conference champion, you're guaranteed a spot in the playoff, just not 1 through 4. Somewhere 5 through 12, they'll slot you in, right? And then you'll have to play a first round playoff game, but you'll be guaranteed a spot. So at least one quote unquote Group of 5 school is going to get into the playoffs every single year because there's only 5 Power 5 conferences, right? And 6 conference champions are guaranteed a spot. Is it perfect? No, but it's a way to sort of cut it down the middle. You got People who want to get subjectivity out of college football, they want to get rid of the committees, get rid of the rankings, the polling done by people, all that. Well, automatic bids is the only way to do that. That's it. There is no other way. That's the only way to do it. And then you got another group of people that say, no, I don't care about all that. I just want the best teams in. Well, best teams according to who? Well, the only way to do that is with a committee, a playoff committee. So you're going to have both. You're going to have both. You're going to have automatic bids, and some teams are going to get in based on that. Then you're going to have a selection committee that fills in the rest of the bracket. There you go. College football playoff expansion starting in the 2024 season. Have a great day.